I woke up and saw him. My father watched him from his bedroom while calling the police. When the burglar left and the police were there with the lights on, his footprints were in the shag carpet. Welcome to Daily Dose Reddit. What is the creepiest, most blood-chilling thing you or someone you know have ever experienced? About 10 years ago, I took my dog out for a short walk. We lived in a run-down but historic part of town, old houses that are either beautifully maintained, abandoned, or generally going to shit. There was a good mix of people in that neighborhood. Anyway, walking the dog, I get about 3 or 4 houses down and stop at the corner while Pony sniffs some grass or whatever. I turn around and suddenly there is a man standing way too close to me. No idea where he came from. I'm usually very aware of my surroundings and Pony hated strange men. I stumbled a few steps back. I immediately had this absolute bone-chilling sick feeling. He asked me, "Is that a pit bull?" And I replied yes. Then he said, "Oh, she'll protect you." At this point, my body flooded with adrenaline and I turned to run back to my house. I saw my mom standing on the porch and thought to yell to her. She had no reason to come out on the porch. I honestly think she had a bad feeling. I don't know what good me yelling really did, but it was all I could think to do. Like, "Hey, look, I'm over here." I've never had such a flight response before or since that encounter. When I was about 6 or 7, we had this neighbor that would regularly try to invite me over for cake and candy, or to play with the dogs he owned. My parents didn't trust him, so of course, invites were declined. Years later, we learned that he regularly raped his 12-year-old stepdaughter and got her pregnant. When he went to trial, it was revealed that there were 4 other young girls in his past that he had abused. The guy used to decorate his house like a haunted mansion every Halloween, and kids would go crazy for it. I'm so glad that my parents wouldn't allow me to go there. When I was 16, my parents went out of town for a weekend. It was actually pretty sweet because I got to be king of the castle for the weekend. So I get home that Friday night and just dick around, internet, video games, etc., and start watching TV around dusk. The way our living room was set up was that there was a set of glass doors right next to the television that looked out to the back porch backyard. The backyard was surrounded by ivy that grew on a hill around a 45-degree angle. So I'm just mindlessly channel surfing and I see some movement outside. At first I just dismiss it thinking it's a bird or a neighborhood cat or something, but I then notice that whatever is moving is way bigger than a bird or a cat. I go and put my face near the glass and stare into the backyard and there's some dude just crouching in the ivy looking into the house. Our eyes meet and he has somewhat of an, "oh shit," moment and bolts out of our yard. Scared the shit out of me. On April 18th of this year, I came home from work and began working on some homework. After 30 minutes of homework, my aunt entered my mother's bedroom and began screaming hysterically, ordering me to call 911. Once I was on the line with the operator, she asked what the nature of my emergency was. I didn't quite know, so I entered my mother's bedroom to find her dead of a heart attack and laying face down on the floor, wedged between her nightstand and her bed. The operator dispatched the paramedics and instructed me on how to perform CPR. In order to do so, I had to flip my mother onto her back. When I grabbed my mother's cold, lifeless arm, I realized that she couldn't be moved as she was wedged firmly between her bed and her nightstand and rigor mortis had already set in. I was unable to flip her over and I had never seen or touched a dead body before. After the paramedics came and told me that nothing could be done, the medical examiner informed my family that she couldn't be seen as she had been laying on her face for so long. It's assumed by my family that she hit her head on the way down as her dentures were on the floor beside her. The combination of her head trauma and the fact that she had been dead for many hours had rendered her unviewable, as deemed by the officer from the medical examiner's office. To answer your question, the sight and feeling of my mother's deceased body is the most chilling thing that I have ever seen. Her memorial is this Sunday. When I was 3, our home was broken into. The burglar stole money off of my parents' dresser, and then went into my room and just stared over my sleeping body. I woke up and saw him. My father watched him from his bedroom while calling the police. When the burglar left and the police were there with the lights on, his footprints were in the shag carpet. I was on a 15-hour bus trip from the Yucatan to Chiapas in Mexico with my family. It was late at night, and after several hours of driving we stopped at a gas station to go to the bathroom, grab snacks, etc. It would have been like any other trip, however I noticed there was an unusual amount of police. When we got back on the bus, the driver informed us that the police had received a tip that our bus was being targeted for a robbery by Mexican bandits. They would escort us. We drove and drove for hours up a nauseatingly winding road, on the side of a cliff. One police truck in front of us, and one behind us, armed to the nines. I was on high alert, but after a while I dozed off. That was, until the bus came to an abrupt stop. I remember peering out the front window, and seeing a series of large rocks placed strategically across the road. Everything was dark, save these rocks being illuminated by the bus lights. If the police hadn't been there, this is what would have went down. Step 1. Bus driver disembarks, tries to remove rocks. Step 2. Mexican bandits kill bus driver, or holds hostage. Step 3. Bandits board bus. Step 4. Rob, rape, kill. I was 17 years old, white-looking female, I'm a halfie, and the rest of my family is Mexican, or looks full Mexican, and even then I knew what would have happened to me. Kidnapping for ransom would definitely not have been out of the question, and rape a high guarantee. We were in the middle of nowhere on a bloody fiend mountain. If the police weren't there, would I be here to tell this story? Probably not. I was home for the summer from college, and my mother and brother had just headed out for a few-day trip to visit colleges. This meant I was to take care of my father. Dad, something was clearly wrong but we couldn't tell what. He had Parkinson's but it was more than that. But we figured I could handle him. This is when I came to realize something, and his broken mind hated me with a passion. He wouldn't listen to anything I said. Now I admit I was pissed off, so I wasn't doing a terrific job, but even simple things like getting him food was an hour-long ordeal that ended with us shouting. This last time, I called Mom on the house phone because at least he'd listen to her. I gave him one phone and I was on another, yelling at each other through it even though we were 5 feet apart. Poor Mom trying to referee from a few hundred miles away. Finally, Dad hangs up his phone and hands it to me. Oh, he's done, thank God, I think. But then he tries to take the still active phone from my hand, which I refuse. And that's when it happens. It gives me chills to this day. A change came over him. It was subtle, but he stood slightly straighter. It was like for a moment someone else was in his body. He stared at me, and in the most calm, cold voice I have ever heard, said, "I'm going to kill you." There was no emotion behind it. There was no energy. He said it as fact. I was stunned. Mom heard it over the phone. As I stood there, paralyzed, her voice broke through in a whisper. "Key, run." I threw the phone at Dad, rounded the corner and grabbed my keys. My car screamed out of the driveway. It was pure animal instinct for me at that point. I had to run. Because if I stayed there, Dad didn't really remember what happened. He was confused as to why I was suddenly gone. I have no idea what went on in his head at that moment, but I stared into something back there. When my friend's dad was around 17 years old, he decided to go camping with about 8 or so of his friends. This took place in the Wisconsin forest. When they got to the site, they decided to split up to collect firewood in groups of 2, and meet back at the site in around 20 minutes. One group wasn't back right away, and since they were a couple, they just assumed they were fornicating in some bushes, and cracked a couple jokes about it. After around an hour they decided they should probably go look for them, and headed off to search in the area they had been collecting wood. They saw behind a bush part of the girl's bloody shirt, and the man's shoes were lying scattered around the scene. They quickly rushed back to their car so they could drive to the park ranger's office, which was about 5 miles away, and report the incident. However, they found that their gas had been siphoned, so they had no choice but to walk. On their walk back to the office, they saw a semi pass by with one driver and 2 faces pressed up against the window, which they believe were their friends begging for help. The 2 friends were reported missing and have never been found to this day. We had a break-in the home I lived in as a child. I was about 5 or so, and I used to come home from school and I would be alone as my sister was at school and my parents were at work. The house was at the bottom of a long driveway too, with a big ass yard and a huge bush with a river behind it, so it was kind of isolated. One day I came home from school, down the driveway as usual, went to unlock the gate and noticed that our front door was broken but the gate wasn't. As I said, I was only 5, so I wasn't very smart. I proceeded to open the gate to go in, and as I entered, I heard a few someones running out the back door. I went into the house and saw that the burglars had broken in through a back window and just took everything. Point of the story is that they were still in the house when I arrived home, and when they heard the front gate opening, they fled out the back as they probably thought it was my dad, who is a police officer. Had they known it was just a 5-year-old kid, who knows what would have happened to me. Makes my fiend blood run cold just thinking about it. So, this happened senior year of high school. My best friend and I were at her house, which was way up in one of the canyons, and she had a long, windy driveway. We had been there all day and her mom had gone out, and she and I were supposed to go meet a couple friends in Hollywood that night. Anyways, we had been goofing around all day and watching scary movies at whatnot, and we started to get ready. Her bathroom had one of those her double sink deals, so she was near one and I was at the other. All of a sudden I got the creepiest feeling, like, all of the hair on my arms stood up and I had this sudden feeling of panic. To this day it is the most terrified I have ever been. I was putting on eyeliner when it happened and I caught her eye in the mirror and said, "We need to leave. Right now." I thought she would be like, "What? You're being ridiculous or what have you," but instead she said, "I know." My blood ran cold when she said it. We left so quickly that we just grabbed what was in front of us. We booked it out of her house and down the driveway, which we weren't supposed to be on because her mom had just had it repaved, and her car was parked down on the street. We rounded the curve in the driveway and there was an SUV parked dead center in the middle of the street without its lights on. Suddenly, the lights turned on full blast, the SUV blared its horn and took off. We scrambled the rest of the way down, totally ruining the new paving, and were getting into her car and calling the police when her mom pulled up right behind us. To this day, I do not know if it was a robber or what, but the fact that she and I both got the sense of dread at the exact same time creeps me out to no end. Thank you so much for watching.